Hi again, I'm Len Rydell, Executive Director of the Blue and Gray Education Society, and I'd like to welcome you to the second lecture that we conducted in support of our Tullahoma to Chickamauga field study tour, which was done in June 2000 out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. This presentation was a combination between Steve Woodworth and Jim Ogden, and this focused on the Chattanooga campaign. And that campaign, whereas Tullahoma was a campaign that ostensibly maneuvered Braxton Bragg out of central Tennessee, where he posed a threat both to Murfreesboro and Nashville, and instead pushed him back to what Bragg perceived to be a relatively secure base of operations supported by the Western and Atlantic Railroad at and around Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the subsequent campaign, while Tullahoma goes up to the Cumberland Plateau and then basically finishes with Bragg being vamoosed out of that area, the next stage of that is Rosecrans trying to get at Bragg and the options that he has for using the relatively barren Cumberland Plateau and the various sundry ravines and valleys and mountains that are available for him for operations. We learned a lot out of this, and you would, if you've been on some of these tours and been on the ground, will as well. You know, we look at mountains and we think you go up a hill and you reach the crest of the mountain, and 300 or 400 yards later, since the mountain would go up and get narrower at the top and so forth, you would then get to the top and maybe drive around quarter, half a mile or so, and then you'd start back down the other side. Well, what we found in this program is we're talking about plateaus on top of mountains that in some cases are miles and miles and miles across, that if you didn't know that you were on top of a mountain, you wouldn't think you were on top of a mountain, because as far as you could look and see in any direction, you would just see plains and level area. It wouldn't be obvious that you were sitting on top of a mountain. And as a geographic figure, it leads one to ask the geologists among us is, how was it possible for places like Sand Mountain and Lookout Mountain to head farther to the south and be the structures, or the what's the word I'm looking for? The geologic formations that they are. If you were interested in that, though, a really superb series, which I recommend to you, the Teaching Company coordinated and worked with the National Geographic Society, and a good friend of mine who very sadly and far too early passed away a few years ago, by the name of Ford Cochran, was a professional geologist, and he does a series for the Learning Company on the national parks, and in that he does talk about the foundations of the Lookout Mountain chain, the Blue Ridge Smokies, all these other things, in the sort of information that when you put that together is a really, really fine grounding to help you understand the nature of this hostile terrain that must be mastered and negotiated to understand the Chattanooga campaign that precedes the Chickamauga campaign. To read it in a book is to look at William Glenn Robertson's book that came out a couple of years ago on the Chattanooga campaign. A second volume is due out in a couple of years, I'm sure, but This book is an excruciating detail in over 430 some odd pages and almost 200 pages, I think, of endnotes and documentation and so forth, is the definitive work of what Jim and Steve are going to talk to you about over the next hour. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy two really significant historians, Jim Ogden and Steve Woodworth, as they talk about an introduction to the Chattanooga campaign.
Okay. Here we are again. It's sort of like starting again, and it's sort of like continuing the same thing. Most of you have been here. It's good to see some new faces that are also familiar faces. Okay, so ended a 9 days campaign, 10, how you count them. Rosecrans was, well, somewhat pleased with the results of the Tullahoma campaign. You know, a few other things have been going on that summer. Rosecrans was afraid that the War Department would overlook his accomplishments, the accomplishments of his army. About the time the Tullahoma campaign is ending, you've got the Battle of Gettysburg being fought and coming to an end. In fact, about July 4th, you've got the Army of Tennessee, Bragg's Army, going back into Chattanooga. You've got Lee's Army beginning its retreat from Gettysburg. And you've got Vicksburg surrendering. If anybody is interested, you also have Theophilus H. Holmes' unsuccessful attack on Helena, Arkansas. So it's not a good day for the Confederacy. It's a very good time for the Union. And Rosecrans was afraid that his army's accomplishments would be overlooked and all that. So he sends a dispatch to the War Department in which he makes a statement something like, I beg that the accomplishments of this army will not be overlooked merely because they are not written in letters of blood. It had not been a particularly bloody campaign. A few hundred Union casualties. Confederate casualties would have been comparable if you counted the people who stopped bullets. But you have to add a rather uncertain number, but probably several thousand deserters, or missing, or captured, however you want to count them. Soldiers who perhaps have been impressed with the ranks. Impressment had been, as we've heard already, used vigorously in Tennessee up to this time. And also soldiers who are leaving because of the lost territory. Now let me say something about lost territory. What's the significance of the Tullahoma campaign? If you read a recent slim book on the Tullahoma campaign, you'll find out that it was the most important campaign of the war, indeed the decisive campaign of the Civil War. Not to make you feel like you've wasted your money coming here, but I am not going to go alone. It was an important campaign. Yes, it was important. In fact, in terms of, it is probably the most important campaign that has been studied this little. Okay? About any other campaign of equal importance has been studied a lot more. But it was not the most important campaign. But what did it do? As we're winding it up and we're sort of counting our money now or counting our winnings, or no, shouldn't gamble, except anymore. But what did this campaign accomplish? It gave the Union some territory. Union Army advances from a position around Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which you know now is a good distance from here, to a position around Winchester, Tennessee, as more or less the headquarters of the Army. Headquarters moves from Murfreesboro to Winchester, which is a lot closer, right? Just the other side of the Cumberlands from here. Union Army retreats that far. Confederate Army headquarters moved from Tullahoma, just behind the hills edging the Highland Rim, to Chattanooga, a considerable withdrawal. A lot of territory has changed hands. Now, you could say, oh, it's just territory. And indeed, in some ways, not the most valuable territory in terms of industrial production. I would have heard a lot more to lose North Alabama in this time in terms of industrial production. Not a great farming country. But losing territory is significant. I have ideas of playing with this concept a little more later on in terms of what it does to the morale of the two sides. when your side is on the march, you're advancing, you're taking territory. You know, your buddy might get shot taking Hoover's Gap, or you name it, wherever. But you took Hoover's Gap by Georgia, and you don't have to take that again on the road to the end of the war. And you took Hoover's Gap. That's demoralizing the soldiers, like when you go to Vietnam. You take hill number 421, you lose your buddies doing it, and then you march back. And the next day you go back and you take it again. It's demoralizing the troops. So taking territory was encouraging to the Union forces, encouraging to the Army of the Cumberland. The country at large didn't really need nor pay much attention to the morale boost that the Tullahoma campaign. They were getting just plenty of morale boost, thank you, otherwise between Vicksburg and Gettysburg. It was a downer for the Confederates, to be sure. That's almost a trite term. It hurt. Again, how much this would depress you if you were a Southerner, depending on where you were. If you were living in Mississippi, you probably had other problems. The problem with Vicksburg is gone. Jackson is well on its way to its nickname, having its nickname of Chimneyville, for good reason. You know, Virginia, well, you've got concerns over there too. But if you are from this part of the country, North Georgia, if you are from Tennessee, here we get back to those deserters. Not only are these people deserting, some of them, because they have been pressed into the ranks. I don't know if anybody, well, there is a guy, Mark Weitz, is doing a study of desertion in all the Confederate armies, and I'm really eager to see what he's going to come up with. He's done desertion among Georgia troops already. I'm really eager to see what he's going to come up with regarding desertion among Tennessee troops. And just who is leaving at this time in the war. We don't know if they're all conscripts. We probably aren't safe ground assuming a lot of them are. But another reason to desert, this is borne out wherever you are in the Confederacy. If you're a Confederate soldier, the more the Yankees are in your home county, the more you want to leave the Army. I've written a book, it's not out yet, it's coming out probably fall of 2001, on the 8th Georgia Regiment. We had companies from all over the state of Georgia. This holds absolutely true. The longer, you almost make it a precise correlation, the longer the Yankees are in the home county, the more the soldiers desert. They don't necessarily go home to their people, but they go over to the Yankees, take the oath, and spend the war north of the Ohio. It's just for them, the wars are fighting to keep the Yankees away from your home and hearth and family, and the Yankees are there. So what's the point? You get out. Anyway, a lot of the guys did. So the Union front has advanced. They've gotten some territory. Territory that's not in itself enormously valuable, and yet it is encouraging to the Union, demoralizing to the South. It promotes desertion among Confederate forces, and here, probably most important thing, it brings Rosecrans' army closer to Chattanooga, which is an important goal. That is a valuable piece of territory, because Chattanooga is the gateway to about every place you want to go in this part of the country. You want to get into Georgia? Well, Chattanooga is the gateway to that. Unless you want to go by way of Mobile or something. Really, Chattanooga is the gateway if you want to go to Georgia. You want to go into East Tennessee? They managed to insert some troops into East Tennessee later. But if you really want to have a reasonable, viable presence in East Tennessee, it's going to be awfully hard to do without having Chattanooga. Chattanooga is the gateway. You've got the Tennessee Gorge, Tennessee River Gorge, west of town. You've got the railroads, the railroad running west, which isn't very functional beyond Stevenson, but eventually will be set into order. You've got the railroad running to Nashville, you've got the railroad running to Knoxville, and you've got the railroad running down to Atlanta. Very important places, we've said before. And one of the important, maybe the most important aspect of the Tullahoma campaign is it puts Union forces that much farther down the road in Chattanooga. What does the Tullahoma campaign not do? Well, there's the big, it didn't happen, or it might have been, or whatever you call it. It did not destroy the Army of Tennessee. In fact, it did not really do serious material damage. It lost a couple of thousand men, but that tends to be small change in a war like this. It doesn't hurt them as bad as a major battle. A little bit of wear and tear, a little bit of abrasion. Morale damage to the guys who stayed, and maybe, but there's a lot of fight left in those guys. In fact, there's a lot of fight left in the Army of Tennessee, period. And that's one thing we need to keep in mind. It's one thing that William Stark Rosecrans needed to keep in mind. And he did some of the time, but sometimes he seemed a little prone to forget. The Army of Tennessee was still an undefeated army, with a lot of people there, very willing to fight, a lot of fight in them, and you can't leave either them or a live dragon out of your calculations if they're in the Navy, like, to borrow a phrase from Tolkien. Well, so he doesn't destroy the Army of Tennessee. Why not? The Hobbit, for Tolkien fans.
Thank you for enlightening us.
Okay. Have you read The Hobbit?
No, it's not high on my list.
I'll have to assign that for next time.
I'm grateful to you, thanks.
Okay.
The
Yeah, that would be the, yeah, let's do that. Do a tour of Middle Earth. That would be good.
Let's test one a little bit, see if we can do that.
Yes.
What's the exact quote again, so that everybody gets it?
Maybe some of you can correct me if I get a word or two wrong, but never do to leave it is never good to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if one is in the neighborhood. Well, anyway, fine. The Army of Tennessee cannot be left out of your calculations. Now, why doesn't the Army of Tennessee get destroyed? Rosecrans says it's because of the rain. Maybe so. That's not an unreasonable supposition. Maybe, if they hadn't had 9 days of terrible rain, if they hadn't had the 500-year rainy spell, maybe Rosecrans would have gotten it. Remember that we don't know Rosecrans' plans from him writing. Now, here was my plan. I wanted to do it like this. Nor do we have an operational order. Now, here's what we're going to do, and here's how it's going to happen. So this is why historians argue a little bit about which group was a feint and which group was the main body. Clearly, Rosecrans wanted something serious to happen on Thomas's front through Hoover's Gap. Undoubtedly. This was a main effort. Rosecrans rode with that column. That column had the heaviest one. Clearly, the Shelbyville effort,
Guys, yeah.
thank you, Guys Gap, was a feint. That we can be sure of. Clearly, the Liberty Gap effort was a feint. What about Crittenden's effort up there on the far northern end? Well, hard to say. A feint, maybe. Possibly a little ace in the hole in case Thomas gets stuck. We're left surmising. It was a relatively weak column and it was way out there. Could Rosecrans have thought that if the roads had stayed dry, Crittenden might have been able to make more out of this turning movement? We really don't know. Only that Rosecrans said, if it hadn't rained like this, he would have begged Bragg's army. Of course, one thing to remember, he might not have too. Wet roads are wet for everybody. And Bragg might have been able to counter something. He wasn't able to. And he was able to extricate his army. That's about all you can say for that. And so the Tullahoma campaign is a definite, advantage for that round to the Union, but not decisive. And Rosecrans stops. Now, the authorities in Washington, you will recall, they've gone on a little bit of, in terms of Rosecrans' stock in Washington has been as volatile as the Dow Jones average in recent times. It's been up and it's been down. In January of '63, Rosecrans' stock was high, very high, because, and I'll just review quickly, remember in the fall of '62, Lincoln decided this war is not going anywhere and we're going to have new commanders and we're going to get someplace. So he sacks McClellan and we get somebody who's going to do something, somebody who will get somewhere, Ambrose Burnside. No, it came to that. And Grant and Sherman are re-energized, and we get Chickamauga fighting. Oh, that was a small scale. Fredericksburg, that was not pretty, believe me. And then Rosecrans, of course, is put in there for Buell, remember? And he goes down to Stones River, and they have a little thing there. But Lincoln said of that, later on, he wrote, "I cannot forget, while I remember anything, that back in January last, you gave us a hard-fought victory when the country could not have survived defeat." In other words, Lincoln was saying, if you hadn't won the Battle of Stones River, I'm not sure we could have held morale together in this country. Well, we don't know, but anyway, they really appreciated him for that. And so Secretary of War Stanton is writing to Rosecrans, just you can have anything you want. I'll give you anything you want. And Rosecrans seems to take this seriously. You remember the 6 months that he prepared, and he had this huge shopping list, and he got a lot. He also wanted to be promoted to outrank Grant. You can get that. But as the 6 months went on, Rosecrans' stock had been dropping and dropping. Now, with the Tullahoma campaign, it's going to take a little upward bump, and in his credit with Lincoln and Stanton and Halleck, but only a little upward bump, because they look around, Gettysburg, and we won this big victory over Lee, and there's Vicksburg. Now that's what we need. There's Grant, and he captures Pemberton's army. That's the kind of thing we need. And they look around and they think the Confederacy is on its last legs. Now it's easy for us to discount that. That's a foolish idea. They held out until 65, but of course they didn't know that. And actually, a lot of Northerners call it Vicksburg. Well, the Confederacy must be half dead. There were people, officers, resigning from the Army in the late summer of '63 because they believed, the Army of Tennessee, Grant's Army, because they believed, well, Vicksburg's been taken, the war's won. And they actually were a little surprised, a few of them, not huge numbers, but I think a couple, or one comes to mind right away, I think of others. They just thought the war was won. Surely it's over. Well, the guys in Washington, Lincoln, Halleck, Stanton, they don't necessarily think the war is won. They think the war could be won. If we would keep up the pressure, we could get them down. Later in the war, much later in the war, after Five Forks, during the pursuit of Lee's army towards Appomattox, Phil Sheridan says, "If the thing be pressed, I think Lee will surrender." And of course, Lincoln reads this and he says, "Let the thing be pressed." Well, Lincoln wants the thing to be pressed right now. Maybe we could end this war a lot sooner. And so, although Rosecrans' stock has taken a little upward bump from the Tullahoma campaign, it quickly begins to recede, quickly drops again. Because he stopped. What's he stopping for? Isn't he supposed to continue? Isn't he supposed to win the war? Now, we understand that Rosecrans faced some very real problems. Generals usually do. And when a general stops like this, or when a general doesn't pursue Meade, allowing Lee to escape, or Rosecrans not pursuing it, or at this point, reasons can be brought forward that look pretty good and are, they're not crummy reasons. It would have been extremely difficult to do more. But then you look at generals like Grant. Grant waged a different kind of war. Grant had a different philosophy of war. It was a war of momentum. It was much, much different than Rosecrans. Rosecrans' philosophy was wait until you have everything perfect. Your plan is perfect. Your supplies are perfect. Your preparations are perfect. Your transportation is perfect. And then, or as close to perfect as can humanly be got, and then you advance and you wage the perfect campaign. Whereas Grant, you prepare, yes, and you try to get things right. But, well, as Grant put it, you get at the enemy as quick as you can, you hit him as hard as you can, and you keep moving on. I could add to that, Grant had, well, for example, early spring '63, one of Grant's soldiers is captured by the Confederates along the Mississippi River. Recall Grant had been trying stratagem after stratagem to go through the bayous and go this way and go that way to get around Vicksburg. And the Confederates cast this in the teeth of the Union prisoner. Everything Grant's trying is a failure. And the Union prisoner simply said, yes, but he has 100 more ideas and he'll try and keep trying until one of them succeeds. And that was Grant. It was a different type of war. It was a warfare of momentum. Things weren't going to be perfect for you, but they were going to be worse for the other guy. You might not be in great shape, but he was worse off. And you would keep after him, and you would never let him get the initiative back. You would never let him get his equilibrium back. You would never let him recover. Once you had that advantage, you would keep pressing it until he couldn't do much, until he was helpless, until he was done. That was Grant's way of making war. It became Lincoln's way of making war. Lincoln and Company in Washington looked at Grant and said, that's the kind of way we need to make war. And that wasn't William S. Rosecrans' way of making war. Which way was better? Well, if your enemy will sit still and await your pleasure, then Rosecrans' way was definitely better. Rosecrans' way definitely worked better. In fact, for an initial move to get started, when you don't yet have momentum, from a position of stasis, for getting the momentum on your side, Rosecrans' method was pretty good. As long as the other guy will wait for you to move first. But if the other guy, well, what if the other guy does something in the meantime? What if, while you wait and prepare, he does something else? Well, 6-week gap here follows the battle of the campaign for Tullahoma. And during the 6-week gap, Rosecrans is going to prepare, but some other people are going to do that. What's Rosecrans do? Well, he's got to bring up more supplies. He's got to repair that railroad, as we heard today. He wants to get a new locomotive for the Tracy City branch of the railroad. He wants a lot of stuff. He's got to make plans. So he has to set everything in order. Now, as he does this, he once again comes under pressure from Washington. Same kind of pressure he's getting before. So basically, it's back to normal on the Rosecrans front. Pressure from Washington. Meanwhile, on the Confederate side, there is deep concern about what's going on here. Chattanooga is important, and it appears to be threatened. Not only that, but by very late summer, Knoxville is threatened as well. Union Army of the Ohio, under none other than Ambrose Burnside, a Fredericksburg infantry, marches south out of Camp Dick Robinson in Kentucky, and is moving towards Knoxville and is threatening Knoxville. And there's a strong concern in the Confederacy about Knoxville, because Knoxville lies right on the railroad connection between the Virginia front and the Tennessee front. One of the things that the Confederates have always congratulated themselves upon and put great hope upon is that we have interior lines. That means that while the Yankees are moving around the exterior, this periphery of our compact Confederacy, we can move reinforcements around within the Confederacy and can support the different fronts in that way. Well, a key element of any realization of interior lines for the Confederacy is this Virginia to Tennessee railroad link that goes from here in Chattanooga up to Knoxville, and from Knoxville on up to Virginia. And now it's threatened, really, here at Chattanooga and also at Knoxville. Now, at different times during the war, there had been some discussion in Richmond. Should we send troops to the West? In May of 1863, there had been discussion of sending one division of James Longstreet's corps west to Mississippi to reinforce Joseph Johnston in what were supposed to be efforts to relieve the Vicksburg garrison or lift the siege of Vicksburg. That didn't happen. The division that would have gone was Pickett's division, and how history might have been different if that had happened. We wouldn't be talking about Pickett's charge, I suppose, today. It would have happened someplace else. No, Johnston was in command there. It wouldn't have happened. In fact, Lee, at the time, wrote of the uncertainty of those troops' employment should they be sent to the West, which is as strong as Lee would put the fact that I don't think Johnston could do anything at all with those men. The division was not sent west in May of '63, and instead it had its little rendezvous with Thane, or on the slopes of Cemetery Ridge, as Mosby would later tell Pickett, he made you immortal, meaning Lee. But now, there's certainly a different perspective on things. Lee's army has not brought great results in the Eastern Theater. Lee's stock is not as high as it was. Indeed, Lee has offered to resign. The offer has been rejected by Jefferson Davis, but nevertheless, Lee's stock, while still high, is not at the astronomical altitude that it was before, where Lee could simply say, I don't want to do this, and it didn't get done. Lee was never in favor of sending troops away from his own army. Simply never was. Because he believed the Confederacy's only chance to win the war was in Virginia. But this time, Jefferson Davis will prevail. Davis holds discussions with Leanne Richmond, and the decision is made late summer of '63, August of '63, indeed, as the coming campaign is getting started. They take plenty of time to discuss it. Davis always takes plenty of time to discuss it. Doesn't make quick decisions. They take time to discuss it. They need time, and notice Rosecrans gives them time. And the decision is made to send 2 divisions of Lee's army west to reinforce Bragg. Initially, the thought was that they would be sent through Knoxville and join Bragg quickly, and then they would help to protect Knoxville and Chattanooga, prevent those places falling into federal hands. In fact, as you see, before they can really get before they get underway at all, both Knoxville and Chattanooga are lost to the Confederacy, and they have to come by a roundabout route down the eastern seaboard railroads and then up through Atlanta. The 2 divisions that are coming will be those of John B. Hood and Lafayette McLaws, 2 divisions of Longstreet's First Corps of the Army of Northern Virginia. The 2 divisions that had done the fighting on July 2nd at Gettysburg and done, indeed, one of the finest pieces of fighting ever done by any troops anywhere. Tremendous performance by them. Of course, they had lost heavily in the effort. Those 2 divisions will be coming west. Not all of them will be on hand in time for the Battle of Chickamauga, but a significant number of them will. Also, Bragg is due for reinforcements. The decision is made, not hastily, Davis was, but the decision is made that Bragg should receive reinforcements for Mississippi as well. Bragg attached troops to Mississippi to, as we read before, right before the Tullahoma campaign, to try to build up that army of Johnston's to relieve Vicksburg. It didn't happen. Vicksburg is gone now, and the need for troops is not as strong in Mississippi. Joe Johnston, who is still commanding in Mississippi, does not fail to add when sending troops to Bragg that this is a loan, and I want the troops back. But nonetheless, the troops are coming. The troops are on the way to Bragg from Mississippi and from Virginia. What then of Rosecrans' method of making war? Waiting till everything is perfect. Making it war as if he were conducting an experiment in a laboratory, or as if he were designing a new type of pontoon bridge, or pontoon bridge. Well, it didn't work out quite as well in this case, because by the time it gets moving again, the wheels have been set in motion that are going to raise Bragg's army to a strength, what is generally believed to be a strength of 68,000 men by the time they go into action on September 19th, to what is believed to be strength on the battlefield, generally is reported for Rosecrans at 62,000. Most numbers in the Civil War can be disputed, but it's generally believed that Bragg had about a 10% manpower edge on Rosecrans when he went into action on September 19th. And that's something that Rosecrans would not have faced if he had gone ahead more quickly. Could he have? Maybe, maybe not, but that's the price he paid for those 6 weeks of preparation. Now I want to give you a quick overview of the campaign. Jim and I were discussing on the bus today how we could improve the presentation here, and we decided the problem with these campaigns is they're far-flung geographically, and geography requires us to follow separate axes of advance because the several Union Corps did that. And you know, it really doesn't make a lot of sense, wouldn't be the best use of our time, and it might run up the kind of bus mileage figures that they've been erroneously giving to Len. If we said, now let's see all the action for August 16th, and we run back and forth across the Union front. Now let's see the 17th, and we run back and forth across the Union front. And it would probably take us longer to do the campaign than it took Rosecrans to do it, marching on foot and pulling the supplies and mule-drawn wagons. So what we're going to wind up doing, and Jim's going to tell you about this later, but we're going to follow the different axes of advance, and he'll kind of give you the game plan in a minute. But I want to give you an overview of the campaign briefly, so that you kind of have a schematic mental concept of what's going on. You know what you're seeing. Yes?
Maybe I should go ahead and hand my maps out.
Okay, good.
And that way, some of the, they can start looking at those relative to the places we're going.
Okay. Well, while he does that, then I'll start giving you the broad overview of what will be the Chickamauga campaign. Rosecrans is going to launch this campaign August 16th from his positions around Winchester, Tennessee. Rosecrans' object is, I think you could say twofold: take Chattanooga and destroy Bragg's army, with emphasis on the latter of those. Destroy Bragg's army. Now, Rosecrans is smart enough by this point in the war to know to destroy a Civil War army, you have to trap it. You're not going to destroy a Civil War army by simply hitting it head on and just pushing after it. That won't do it. You have to trap it. And how do you do that in the Civil War? You turn it. Get around, as Rosecrans had done in Tullahoma. You go around them and you threaten their supply lines. Now, where are Bragg's supply lines or lines of retreat? Actually, he has two potential lines of retreat, at least as far as Rosecrans is figuring. Rosecrans figures, what will Bragg's army do? There are two ways Bragg's army can retreat. It could retreat towards Rome, Georgia. In fact, that is the way that it will retreat, more or less down the line of modern-day US 27, or what is then called the, in the area where our concerns will be the Chattanooga-Lafayette Road, or just the Lafayette Road that goes on down to Rome. That is the line on which Bragg's army will indeed pull out. Rosecrans thinks more likely that Bragg will pull out in the direction of Atlanta, following the Western Atlantic Railroad, or, if you want to think in broad general terms, more or less I-85 towards Atlanta. 85, yes, 75. Thank you. 70, 85 was on the interstate. 75, okay, the interstate down to Atlanta. Two lines of retreat. Now, obviously, both lines, they lie to the south and to the southeast of Bragg's position in Chattanooga. So, what Rosecrans wants to do is turn Bragg. He has some obstacles to face, serious obstacles. He's got the Cumberland Mountain Range and some subsidiary landforms. Walden's Ridge, if he's that way, or if he's south of the Tennessee River by that time, which is an obstacle in itself. We just saw this afternoon. Tennessee River is not just a stroll across a puddle, is it? That's going to take some things to get across. And then he's got, moves as he does to the west of Bragg. He's got several of these mountains, as they are in this part of the world. We're told that this crust kind of folded and eroded and what have you, but we've got these long ridges, and they're exactly perpendicular to the line of march that Rosecrans needs to take. We've got Sands Mountain. That's where you get through Running Water Gap there. As the interstate goes through today, you've been through there. You could go through there. You could go through other places. And then you've got, and this is the most significant barrier, you've got Lookout Mountain, long landform that we've been looking at for several days. Has its point here where it looms some 1,400 feet above the Tennessee River in the town of Chattanooga, and then it slants off into Alabama, 80-some miles away. Long landform, and a very, very difficult one. Rosecrans is going to have to get by some landforms. Oh yeah, and there's a Confederate army. Now, Bragg's army is headquartered in Chattanooga, but he's got his forces, of course, spread the sides. Now, you might say, wait a minute. Why doesn't Bragg put his forces on the crest of the Cumberland Mountains? Hard to supply. What are they going to eat? It'll be awfully hard to supply them there. So Bragg, once again, is behind the mountains. Bragg will say during this campaign that a mountain range is like the wall of a house full of holes, and you don't know, and it's got rats in there, and you don't know which hole the rat is going to stick his head out of. And that's the situation he's in. He hopes to be waiting there with a big hammer when the rat sticks his head out and smack it. That's the game he's playing. And to help him know that, he's got cavalry watching on either one of his flanks. Sound familiar? Haven't we done this before? What Rosecrans is going to do will also sound familiar. He's going to advance in several columns. He will fake to his left, Bragg's right, and then he will go around several columns, actually 3 other columns, to his right, Bragg's left. In other words, the real important crossings, well, all the river crossings on Rosecrans Park will be made west, downstream from Chattanooga. The fake, important in that fake will be, once again, you guys get Wilder's Lightning Brigade, supported by other troops. They will do a fine job of faking in the Tennessee Valley, pretending to build pontoons, sawing up lumber, throwing wood scraps into the river to float down past Tennessee, past Chattanooga, and Wilder and company will have a fine time actually showing up on the opposite bank of the river from Chattanooga, where the sometime Indiana druggist Eli Lilly will set up his battery and shoot up the place. Apparently some tremendous artillery marksmanship, and do some real sharpshooting. Dug in Confederate siege guns, silenced by Lilly's field battery on the opposite bank. Boats shot up in the river. Yeah, a few stray shells do take out some civilians. That's a bad thing. It's not a good day to be a civilian in Chattanooga. But they get Bragg's attention big time. And Bragg has to look to his right. He has to look in the direction of Knoxville because the potential threat there is so great. Because who's in Knoxville by this time? Ambrose Burnside, the Union Army of the Ohio is in Knoxville. And Bragg has to take seriously any Union fake towards that direction. Because that could mean that Rosecrans and Burnside are going to unite and make common cause, and the Confederates are very, very frightened of that. So it's one of those things, it's so dangerous that Bragg has to take it seriously. Once again, he buys the flag, the fake, shifts reconnaissance forces in that direction, more detail later. But it's kind of a familiar story by now. Bragg has been faked out. In this case, reconnaissance is all north of town, and the Federals are crossing south and west of town, crossing the Tennessee rivers. They come down out of the hills that we came down with the bus there. I'm sure it was steeper than a 6% grade, getting down out of there. They come down to Bridgeport, where some cross by constructing a rough bridge there, rebuilding a bridge that had been destroyed, to the mouth of Battle Creek, where other Union forces cross in an odd, motley collection of boats, scows, indeed hanging onto logs and such like, all where they swim across. Union soldiers write in their diaries what an amazing scene this is, this crossing of the Tennessee. This is spectacular. They realize they're doing something spectacular. But they get across. And what is Bragg doing? Bragg has completely lost them off his radar screen. And by early September, Bragg realizes he has completely lost track of the Union Army. Whereas Rosecrans at this time, well, they get across the river with ammunition for 2 battles, considerable amount of good supply of food. They press on. They press on over Sand Mountain. And then Rosecrans is faced with what is one of the key decisions of the campaign, although it's hard to see how he could have made it differently. His forces move to pass Lookout Mountain. He's been advancing in several columns. That's the reason you have Army Corps. That's what you have Army Corps. That's the Napoleon pioneered the use of Army Corps. And the idea is they're big enough they can't be crushed in one day. You keep them within a day's march of each other, and you march them separately. And you can move your army much better. You can do great things as a military. Right? Okay, good. So you march your corps separately, but wait a minute, you're really going to have to separate it now. Because there are only certain places where you can cross Lookout Mountain. You can go around the point, more or less the way I-24 does, not on the shelf. It's been built out to the river. But you can get around the point of Lookout Mountain with the Waxahachie Turnpike. You can take a pass that is, the next one is 18 or 24 miles down.
The next real usable one's about 18.
Yeah, okay. I've got intervals and I sometimes get them switched. The next pass is 18 miles down, and the next one after that's another 24 miles down. And when we say pass or gap here, what we mean is is a gap in the palisades up there along the top of the mountain. You've probably seen them, they're like the top 50 feet is a sheer rock wall. And what you've got there is just a break in that. You can take wagons over, but you're still going to have to go all the way up and across and down. And there are these three potential ways for Rosecrans to get across. You take your army through only one of them, that's attended with about as many problems as splitting your army up. The only option open to Rosecrans, I think, I don't think there was another viable option open than to go for all three gaps. Send somebody to pin Bragg in place by threatening Chattanooga from near the point of the mountain. And in fact, that's going to be Crittenden's 21st Corps. They're going to be over there where we have been the last 2 days going back and forth on I-24 when we've looked at Lookout Mountain from the other side. Crittenden and company, more or less in that valley over there. And they're threatening Chattanooga directly, pinning Bragg in place. The two corps, Thomas's 14th Corps, is going to cross the mountain 18 miles down, and Cook's 20th Corps will cross the mountain 42 miles from the point of the mountain. Now, on the kind of roads that you have on top of, or at the bottom of, for that matter, Lookout Mountain, that's more than a day's march. Your corps are more than a day's march. Your corps are more than a day's march apart. Not the best practice, but it's the only option reasonably available. And in early September, Rosecrans reaches the top of Lookout Mountain, and he sights dust clouds. On roads to the east of him, dust clouds caused by troops marching south. Rosecrans and Thomas view that, they know what it means. Bragg has detected their presence, Bragg knows he's been turned, and he's retreating. And Rosecrans makes another key decision. He's made the decision, not much of a decision because he had to spread his army out. Now, Thomas says, great, Bragg's retreating, go back to Chattanooga, we'll consolidate our gains for another 6 weeks, I suppose, and then we'll advance again. Rosecrans knows that Washington didn't like that. Rosecrans decides to press on and try to capture Bragg. I really can't blame him too much for that. But the problem is, he's trying that after having waited for 6 weeks. And that's what's going to burn him, because during that 6 weeks, from July 4th to August 16th, Bragg has gotten, well, the wheels were set in motion for Bragg to get reinforcements. During this first week of September, we'll get into the details of that later, Bragg is beginning to receive reinforcements. Bragg, yes, pulls out of Chattanooga, but he reconcentrates south of Chattanooga, probably have this on a map somewhere, directly south of Chattanooga, around Lafayette, more or less. Not everybody's in Lafayette, but he concentrates roughly around Lafayette. What this means is that when Rosecrans' army, because Rosecrans does not take Thomas's advice. Thomas says, let's stop and go back to Chattanooga. Rosecrans says, no way, we're going to go on, we're going to get Bragg. This time, we're going to get him. What that means is, when Rosecrans comes over, Bragg's not running away. Bragg's concentrated his army around Lafayette. Bragg is looking for a fight. Once more, Bragg is closer to each one of the separated segments of Rosecrans' army than they are to each other. This means that Rosecrans is in the proverbial deep doo-doo. And he comes very close, during the second week of September, he comes very close to really getting his lunch eaten for him. Bragg is in a pretty good position to destroy some significant parts of Rosecrans' army. We'll get into the details of that in McLemore's Cove. That's probably in your map. We're going to be going there, where eventually, I think that's the day after tomorrow, McLemore's Cove, the chief area, where Rosecrans' center column, 14th Corps, is beginning to advance down off Lookout Mountain into McLemore's Cove, which is a little bit of a cul-de-sac, which is a potential trap. And Bragg is right there at Lafayette, perfectly positioned to absolutely crush them. Bragg gives the orders. The troops are in position. Bragg gives the orders. It doesn't happen. The next day, Bragg gives the orders again. Actually goes to one of the fronts to set things to the right. They're going to attack from two fronts. It doesn't happen again. Army of Tennessee, right? And subsequently he has a somewhat lesser chance to Perhaps again, Critton been a bloody nose. Crittenden moves into Chattanooga when Bragg pulls out, so the Federals had Chattanooga at that time. It doesn't happen. And then the final phase of the Chickamauga campaign, and then I'll turn it over to Jim very quickly, is simply this, that Rosecrans realizes that he is in a pickle, realizes that he is in potentially great trouble, so Rosecrans begins trying to recover from the positional advantage that Bragg has on him. Rosecrans also learns that reinforcements are on the way to Bragg. Rosecrans knows that Bragg has an advantage now in position and numbers, and Rosecrans tries to recover. Basically, that's going to be the last phase of the campaign. First, Rosecrans pulls his army together. Bragg, by this time, realizes also that he's lost a chance to take Rosecrans in detail, or in small pieces. So Bragg also, in this last phase of the campaign, Bragg has one more card to play to win a significant victory over Rosecrans. It's the same thing that Rosecrans has been trying to do to him. Go around him, get on his supply lines, and cut him off. And that is what Bragg will try to do. Once Rosecrans reconcentrates roughly in the valley of Chickamauga Creek, Bragg will be trying to get between Rosecrans and Chattanooga, because Rosecrans' supply line now goes through Chattanooga. If Bragg can cut Rosecrans off from Chattanooga, he just might really be able to nab Rosecrans' army. And that is the final series of maneuvers that lead the two armies to collide near the banks of Chickamauga Creek on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of September. That's an overview of the Chickamauga campaign, and now I'll let Jim tell you how we're going to go see it.
Okay. The maps in the handout, as for those of you all who were with us for the Tullahoma phase, these maps come from several different sources, and I said that once I overcame the photocopy difficulties I had originally, you would get a source list. And so the last page in this handout is the source list. Those of you all who are going on both of the programs might want to take the first set of maps and this set, take the two apart and staple those first maps on top of these so you can have the whole set together. All of you got, once again, a copy of my doctored up railroad map. Not that I'm proud of my artwork or anything, but I continually impress upon people the importance of this Chattanooga region in the course of the war effort. And I think that this map is one of the best reflections of that, or something similar to this, is the best reflection of that. So I use it in almost all of my talks, or a version of it in almost all of my talks, and so you get a second copy of that. Now, we covered a lot of geography, a lot of terrain, a lot of area in the last 2 days looking at Tullahoma. But that was a campaign that took place over a very large geographic area. Now, we had a little extra traveling to do because it was up in Middle Tennessee, and we had to travel up to that area. Well, this next phase of the campaign is going to take place over a pretty large geographic area too, although not quite as large as that the Tullahoma phase covers, and this is closer to Chattanooga. What we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to start out right here in Chattanooga. This is now the goal of the campaign directly. And so we're going to go from our first drive tomorrow morning is a real long one. We're going to go from right here at the hotel down to the riverfront so that we can look at some of the ground that Wilder used to conduct his deception and announce to Braxton Bragg that Rosecrans is on the move once again. And so we'll do that, and then we are going to head back west. You all are probably getting tired of seeing I-24, but I'm going to take another shot at letting you all see the eastern face of the Cumberland Mountains tomorrow. And we're going to go west, and our first stop tomorrow is Stevenson. Stevenson, Alabama. That becomes in this campaign Rosecrans Railroad Supply Head. And we will talk about how supplies, logistics, and geography so define this next phase of Rosecrans' campaign for Chattanooga by being right there at Rosecrans Railroad Supply Head. We will then review again Rosecrans' plan, and we will then set out following Rosecrans' southernmost maneuver column, the column that consisted of Alexander McDowell Cook's 20th Corps and the Federal Cavalry under David Stanley. We will go down to the banks of the Tennessee River at Cape Riggins Ferry, look across the river at that point, talk about the engineering effort and the crossing effort there. And then we will start across these mountain ranges that rise like walls in front of Rosecrans and his advance. We will traverse across the Sand Mountain Range down to Valley Head, following McCook and the cavalry. And then we will climb over the Lookout Mountain Range to the furthest extent of McCook and the Federal Cavalry's movement down to Alpine. Now, as Steve noted, many things are happening chronologically at the same time, but separated by great distance. And so we're going to primarily tomorrow look or discuss things in that. In the South and in the city that really started Coca-Cola, didn't invent the drink, but invented the process of making everybody else drink it. This is the Coca-Cola stage. The original real Coca-Cola money is here in Chattanooga. Around here, if you want to really show your Chattanooga colors, you make sure you've got Coke on everything you distribute. I pause here to just point out the river, be down here on the banks of the Tennessee, and to note the delivery of Rosecrans' calling card on the 21st of August, 1863. Now, as Steve noted last night, Rosecrans has this operational pause of about 6 weeks. After the Tullahoma campaign into mid-August. In that time, he repaired the railroad behind him, brought forward supplies, and then he now moves on in the next phase of the campaign, what we will be studying. And as Steve and I both noted, one element of that is a feint for deception.
I fogged right up.
The troops of Thomas Leon and his triptych, and some attachments, particularly Vintage Brigade of Cavalry and John Thomas Flowers Brigade of Mounted Infantry. That deception is to create the impression that Rosecrans' main effort is coming over Cumberland Mountains, somewhere to the north and west of Chattanooga, and then to cross the Tennessee River somewhere north of Chattanooga. And that the Union Army, probably in conjunction with Ambrose Burnside's move against Knoxville, will approach Chattanooga from the north, and Bragg will have to deal with him from that direction. Rosecrans wants to create that impression, and in the end, by the success of Wilder and Hazen and Minty and Thomas J. Wood, it will be a perfect deception and will draw Bragg's attention. But Bragg, who had largely lost track of Rosecrans, or as Steve said last night, had Rosecrans drop off of his radar screen, Bragg is not aware of exactly what Rosecrans is doing or where Rosecrans will be coming from. And his first indication of the next active phase of the campaign comes on the 21st of August, a day of fasting and Thanksgiving for the Confederates, and by the direction of Jefferson Davis, and there were church services being held in Chattanooga, a continuation of that religious revival that we talked about. And in the Presbyterian Church, one of the prominent clerics of the South, Reverend Palmer from New Orleans, was speaking. The day had been appointed by President Davis as one of fasting and prayer for the Confederacy. It was attended by hundreds of officers and citizens of the community. Colonel Moore and I went together and celebrated, and the celebrated Dr. Palmer of New Orleans was in the pulpit. While he was making his opening prayer, a long one, some shells fell in the streets. The first shots fell softly, though the sound alarmed the congregation, and people began to leave. General Cheatham, who was in the same pew with Colonel Moore and myself, rose and advised the people not to be alarmed. He suggested that the noise was merely horses pawing. But there were some of us who knew better than that. Dr. Palmer went on with his prayer as though nothing unusual was occurring. Then a shot struck and shook the church. Still Dr. Palmer prayed, but he completed his petition without opening his eyes, for there was no one left to hear. Soldiers and citizens alike had left the church. At the door, we found the streets full of excited people running in all directions, some of them carrying their household goods. The perpetrators of the shells into the streets of Chattanooga on the 21st of August is that brigade of mounted infantry under John Thomas Wilder and his attached artillery battery under Eli Lilly. They have come over the Cumberland Mountains, across the Sequatchie Valley, over the Walden's Ridge Range, and on the 21st, taken post on the hills on the north side of Chattanooga, the hills of Stringer's Ridge, and there with four of Lilly's 3-inch ordnance rifles, about noon, they opened fire on the unsuspecting city of Chattanooga. It is quite a surprise to the Confederates. There will be several civilian casualties and several soldier casualties. Many of the city's citizens will rapidly flee from the city. The soldiers will rush to their positions. Confederate guns on Cameron Hill, which was then much more of a hill. Cameron Hill is another thing that befell Chattanooga's revitalization effort in the late 50s and early 60s. The top couple of hundred feet were carved off and hauled over and dumped into the Tennessee River at the base of Lookout Mountain to create that shelf for I-24. Confederate guns located on Cameron Hill, the lower Reservoir Hill where the new ball stadium is today,